Of all the class updates that were seen throughout the Unearthed Arcana process, I'm not sure that any was quite as controversial as the proposed changes to the Druid, and in particular, Wild Shape. Early on in the UA process, the team experimented with the creation of wild shape templates, and though the version they presented was, frankly, not good, the underlying idea was there, and to me at least, was amazing. I'm still disappointed that we aren't getting wild shape templates, but I'll get over it, eventually. Anyway, there's a lot more to talk about, so let's take a look at the 2024 Druid. Hey, I've been working really hard to try and keep up with all of the reveal information, so if you like what I do and want to help support me on my goal of hitting 10,000 subscribers by the time that the 2024 PHB comes out in September, I would really appreciate a sub to the channel. Thanks. Right out the gate at first level, we see an improvement to the Druidic feature. Now, on top of learning Druidic, you also learn the Speak with Animals spell and always have it prepared. This makes so much thematic sense for the class, and is something that I'm really happy to see updated. The alternative was druids who would just always take it, which kind of made it feel more like a tax when it just feels so right with the design of the class, or druids who never pick the spell because it was rarely useful. But now, given that it's always prepared and doesn't count against your amount of prepared spells, it just feels right. I made similar remarks when we saw the Rogues Thieves Can't feature get updated to include an additional language, and this follows that same train of thought for me. Next up, and also at first level, comes a new feature, Primal Order. This is a simple choice that players get to make early on that can help guide their character progression throughout their adventure. You get two choices, Magician and Warden. Selecting either of these can help build the type of druid that you are looking to play. Selecting Warden gives you proficiency in martial weapons as well as with medium armor. Selecting Magician lets you choose an additional cantrip and gives you a bonus on your intelligence nature checks equal to your wisdom modifier. Both of these feel like reasonable and thematically appropriate options. Warden does feel like the quote-unquote better option, but I don't think they're really worlds apart either. Interestingly, though, no mention was made of the previous restriction that druids had in wearing metal armor. This was dropped in the UA, so I'll assume that it's still dropped in the new PHB, but we'll have to wait and see. Wild Shape still comes at second level and is the biggie here, but I promise I won't lament the loss of templates anymore. The version of Wild Shape that we're getting seems very similar to what we saw in UA 8, which does mark a significant improvement over the 2014 version of the feature, but will still require you to churn through the player's handbook or monster manual. Okay, now I'm done. Firstly, you can now activate Wild Shape as a bonus action rather than an action, which is sweet since you don't need to give up the bulk of your turn if you're doing it during combat. Previously, this was only available to the Circle of the Moon Druid, but now it's available to all of them. Also, now instead of your Wild Shape uses being limited to 2 per short or long rest until 20th level, now you start with 2 at 2nd level, 3 at 6th level, and 4 at 17th level. You're able to regain 1 expended use on a short rest, and all expended uses on a long rest. As for the forms that you can Wild Shape into, thankfully, you no longer need to have seen the creatures before. This was always kind of a weird rule anyway, like, I get it, but presumably your druid existed before you began your adventure, so you could have made an argument for just about anything. Anyway, now you can prepare a number of known forms. The amount of and strength of the known forms you have available is determined by your level. You know 4 at 2nd level with a CR of 1/4, but the creatures cannot have a fly speed. You know 6 at 4th level with a CR of 1/2, and the creatures still can't have a fly speed. Finally, you know 8 at 8th level of CR 1, and the creatures can now have a fly speed. It also seems that you can select a creature with a swim speed right away, which was not the case before. I think this on its own is a very nice improvement. Another great change is that now you're able to speak while you're in Wild Shape. I am so happy to see this change made it through. It was always kind of annoying that you couldn't do this before. This update reflects the idea that your druid is not literally transforming into this beast, but rather that they're simply adopting a new form, which is something that the team talked a lot about during the UA process. Finally, you no longer take on the hit points of the beast that you transform into. Instead, you now gain an amount of temporary hit points equal to your druid level, which I think was probably the right move for the health of the game and the feature, and makes it so that druids aren't nearly indestructible anymore. Overall, while it isn't exactly what I wanted for Wild Shape, and I fully recognize that many others hated even the idea of templates, in any case, I do feel like this represents a solid improvement to the feature in general, which I am happy to see. Also at 2nd level comes the new feature Wild Companion. Well, technically this existed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything as an optional rule, but it's now available as a core rule in the player's handbook. Wild Companion provides you with an additional way to use your wild shape. Sometimes you might not want to transform, but still want to feel like you're able to get some value out of this resource that you have available to you. Now, Wild Companion lets you expend one of your uses of wild shape or even spell slots to cast the Find Familiar spell. The concept of using wild shape for other things was something that was played around with throughout the UA process, including at one point granting some healing when it was part of the Channel Nature feature. I think this concept is great and is something that I'm happy to see them exploring more, and can see plenty of subclasses having creative uses for wild shape that don't involve transformation. At 5th level, you unlock Wild Resurgence, which allows you to convert a spell slot into a wild shape use, which you can do as many times as you want per day. But it also allows you to convert one wild shape use into a 1st level spell slot, though you can only do that once per day. I think this is a great feature that continues to deliver additional value for multiple potentially untapped resources, spell slots or wild shapes, and gives you something to do with them. At 7th level comes another new feature, Elemental Fury. This, like Primal Order from 1st level, gives the player another choice. But this is not dependent on what you decided at 1st level. You can lean either way here. You can select Potent Spellcasting, which, as of UA 8 at least, allow you to add your Wisdom modifier to the damage of your damage-dealing cantrips. We didn't get a reveal for how specifically it works in the new PHB, but I wouldn't be surprised if this stuck around. Or you can select Primal Strikes, which allows you to add 1d8 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage on a hit while in wild shape. The cool thing here though is that the damage type is selected when you hit, and you can choose a different one every single time. You don't need to select one and then just be stuck with it. Following that up, at 15th level comes Improved Elemental Fury, which enhances the choice that you made at 7th level, so this time you do need to stick with the same option. Potent Spellcasting now allows you to extend the range of one of your ranged Druid cantrips up to 300 feet, which is honestly crazy, and I'm surprised this survived playtesting. From 300 feet away, you can blast just about anything with Frostbite or Poison Spray constantly, and it can almost never catch up to you. This gets particularly nutty when combined with the 18th level feature Beast Spells, which allows you to cast spells when in wild shape form, so you can also be flying in the air and truly never have a creature get to you. The improved Primal Strikes option instead increases the damage to 2d8 when you hit while in wild shape, which helps to scale up your wild shape damage a bit more, which was always a problem in 2014. Finally, at 20th level, Archdruid is still around and has received some changes. Evergreen Wild Shape allows you, if you roll initiative and have no uses of Wild Shape left, to regain 1. I ranted about features that let you regain resources only when you have none left during the Warlock video, so I won't do it again here, but suffice it to say that I despise this language. Especially for a 20th level feature. Come on, you can snipe a Tarask from 300 feet away with Poison Spray, but you can't just let me always regain 1 use, especially for something as out of control of the player as rolling for initiative. Anyway, the Nature Magician option here is kinda cool and allows you to convert wild shape uses into spell slots, with each contributing 2 levels of spell slots. This is pretty cool and can be used once per day, so it isn't all that abusable either. Onto the subclasses, starting with the Circle of the Moon. All the things you would expect are still here. Much of what we saw in the playtest also seems to have stuck around, with some few changes. Firstly, your Circle Spells feature at 3rd level now lets you cast the spells from the feature even while in wild shape form, which means that you can be casting things like Cure Wounds or Moonbeam in wild shape at 3rd level. This is pretty cool. Also at 3rd level, your Circle Forms feature improves the quality of your wild shape. It lets you transform into a creature with a challenge rating equal to your Druid level divided by 3, rounding down. It also now allows the AC of the beast to either be its own armor class or equal to 13 plus your Wisdom modifier, whichever is higher. And you gain an amount of temporary hit points equal to triple your Druid level, which makes Circle of the Moon Druid significantly tankier while transformed as compared to any other Druid. At 6th level, you unlock Improved Circle Forms, which allows the Druid to swap the damage type on their Beast Form attacks to Radiant damage instead of the normal type. They make a note that this replaces the 2014 ability to deal magical damage, which is yet another hint that this entire concept of magical/non-magical damage might be disappearing, but we don't have enough details on that yet. Moonlight Step is another new feature that comes online at 10th level and allows the Druid to teleport to an unoccupied space that they can see within 30 feet, and then also gain advantage on their next attack before the end of their turn. It's definitely just a trend at this point, as I've mentioned this in every video so far, but I always appreciate ways of encouraging mobility throughout an encounter, and this does exactly that. Finally, at 14th level comes the Lunar Form feature. This is nothing flashy, but it helps address one of the core issues that beast forms had in 2014, scalability. Wild Shape was almost always just the wrong thing to do at higher levels since they just couldn't keep up with enemies given that the stat blocks were static and didn't scale. Now, Lunar Forms grants an additional 2d10 radiant damage on your attacks, which will certainly help close the gap, especially if you combine it with the Primal Strikes option from your Elemental Fury feature. Next up is the Circle of the Land, which has seen some very nice improvements across the board. Firstly, now when you take the subclass and select the type of land that you want to be associated with to get your spell list, you're no longer locked into that choice. You can now switch the land type after every long rest, which is such a nice change. Additionally, the spells on each list have been refined and improved, so there isn't quite the same degree of variance that there was previously. I think this is a great move and can be reflected in a sense of how your druid isn't necessarily tied to the land of their birth, but maybe lands that they've traveled or where they just are currently. It all works together to show how the class is tied to the land and can draw power from it. Also at 3rd level we see a new feature, Land's Aid, which we first saw during the playtest. At that point, the feature allowed you to burn a use of your Wild Shape to select a point that you can see within a certain range and cause an eruption from the earth, dealing damage to creatures and potentially offering healing to others as well. Though no specific mechanics for it were revealed in the video, I feel very confident in saying that the new version is likely going to be very similar, just with maybe some tweaks to the damage, the healing, or possibly even the wording. The land can provide aid to the character in different ways, whether that's through healing magic or destruction, and I think that this is very symbolic of that. Also, like I not so subtly referred to either, this is another great way the class gets to use their Wild Shape resource that doesn't involve transformation. The natural recovery feature, which previously worked very much like a wizard's arcane recovery, has stayed around, but it has been pushed all the way back to 6th level. Additionally, it allows you to cast one of the spells from your associated land type list once per day without expending a spell slot. The 10th level feature, Nature's Ward, has been massively improved in that now, instead of just giving immunity to the charmed or frightened conditions, you now get immunity to poison and a resistance based on the land type that you chose for the day. I think this is a significant boost to the class and the feature. Finally, at 14th level, Nature Sanctuary has also seen some big changes in that it now also lets you consume one of your Wild Shape uses to cause vines and overgrowth to spring from the ground, which provides both you and your allies half cover, and they also get resistance that you have from your land type as well. Circle of the Land has seen so many improvements that I actually agree with Jeremy Crawford here in that it nearly feels like a new subclass. I love the flavor flowing through it, and the power that it brings definitely seems in line with the others that we've seen revealed so far. Next up is the Circle of the Sea, which was one of the few completely new subclasses that we saw in the playtest, along with the College of Dance Bard and the Path of the World Tree Barbarian. It's good to see that the Circle of the Sea has made it through to the final book, as I did find that it added some very interesting designs that I believe added to the class's definition. At 3rd level, the Wrath of the Sea feature essentially allows you to create an aura of pounding waves that emanate outward within a 10-foot radius of you. At the end of your turn, you can cause those waves to crash in an enemy within range and deal cold damage to them equal to an amount of d6s equal to your wisdom modifier. At least that's how it was in UA6, but it also dealt thunder damage then, so who knows. In either case though, I am happy that this feature stuck around. The 6th level feature, Aquatic Affinity, seems somewhat redesigned from UA6. It no longer provides the water breathing spell, since that's now on the subclass list of prepared spells. Instead, now it extends the radius of your Wrath of the Sea feature by an additional 10 feet and grants you a swim speed. On top of that, if you wild shape into a creature that does not ordinarily have a swim speed, it now inherits yours. The 10th level feature, Stormborn, now grants you a fly speed and resistance to cold, thunder, and lightning damage while your Wrath of the Sea feature is active. And finally, the 14th level feature, Oceanic Gift, allows you to confer all of the benefits of your Wrath of the Sea feature onto another character, which can be incredibly powerful. I think this subclass has some amazing ideas that all sound incredibly fun. The only concern I have is that they're all so heavily rely on you being in your Wrath of the Sea form. So I'm slightly concerned that it can feel a little bit like an ultimate ability in some games, where you feel insanely powerful while it's up, and pretty underwhelming when it isn't. If anyone played Archon Wizards back in Diablo 3, that's kinda what I'm worried about. Lastly, the fourth subclass is the Circle of the Stars, which was first revealed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We essentially received no information about the changes made to the subclass, though Jeremy Crawford mentions that it will largely be the same as what we saw in Tasha's, but he did mention that it will now include some additional uses for Wild Shape, but other than that, we'll have to wait and see. The changes to the Druid, while maybe not as flashy as some of the other classes we've seen so far, still feel very meaningful and impactful to me. The entire class and its subclasses have been reworked to provide significantly more synergy and make it easier to play and just enjoy the game. I am particularly fond of the uses that Wild Shape gets in the subclasses, and I'm sure we'll continue to see that explored in the future. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I have been working really hard to try and keep up with everything, so if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to help me reach that goal of 10,000 subs by the time that the Player's Handbook comes out in September. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.